Good evening, Mongo. I was watching your video on the Republicans and 2010 and your observation that we need to remove the Democrats from office in 2010. I do disagree with you on a couple of policy items, or a couple of items that you've spoken about. You need to remember that when the stimulus initially started was when the mortgage market was falling apart. Jobs were beginning to fail because the banks had quit loaning. And if you look at that very carefully and go back into the documents and history of this, you're going to find that the previous president, George W. Bush, started throwing the stimulus money into the economy. This was not President Obama's program. President Bush began throwing that money by the billions out into the banks and corporations. Sadly, President Bush, going out of office, had no concern for what was going to come after he left. He knew that President Obama was going to have to face the fire, so he tossed the money into the system. I used to be a conservative. 27 years I voted Republican for the Republican Party. I believe that they were fiscally conservative enough to move the country forward. However, when I've seen that the Republican Party stood blind while the banking industry was raiding the economy, I lost faith in the Republicans' ability to handle the economy. At the time that President Obama was elected, he really had no choice but to continue the stimulus that George W. Bush put in place. And I don't believe that the tax cuts that George W. Bush put out in his last 2 years in office did anything to benefit the economy. The only ones that truly benefited by those were those making $375,000 a year and higher. And that's proven by the Internal Revenue Service. And if you look on the Internal Revenue Service's website, you'll see where the revenues and the tax cuts made the most effect. The average working class person, 75,000 and below, received virtually nothing in the tax breaks, and those, however, do more to generate revenue for the company than anyone. I don't think that it's fair to blame President Obama concerning the state of the economy when he took office. When he took office, he knew that the unemployment rate was going to climb, and he said so. He knew that there would be difficulty creating jobs. He continued with President Bush's stimulus. However, I don't believe that a couple of the programs that he put in place, such as cash for clunkers and a couple of other smaller stimulus items, were creative enough, or that they didn't. All they did was create a boom for used car sales, or for new car sales in a very minimal way. I think that the dealers were the ones that the car dealers were the ones that came out with any benefit at all. It caused the used car market to fall apart, basically, and the price of used cars, price of even new cars went up at the same time that this revenue was coming in, and the average person in the economy benefited little, if any, from that program. However, the stimulus programs that President Obama put into place in the area of building roads and schools in Indiana here, as the monies were released, the programs that have been created to put people back to work are just now beginning to come into fruition. In Indiana, give an example, 6,111 jobs were created by that stimulus for road construction in Indiana during 2010. These will begin as the winter begins to break and spring and summer come in. 6,111 jobs in Indiana. Now that doesn't bring the country up above the 8% unemployment rate, or below that. And this is just Indiana, 6,000 in Indiana. Now, if we look at that, and it's equivalent to that in 50 states, which it may be less in some states and more in the other, that's 300,000 jobs in 1 year. And that's commendable in any economy. That's commendable. Now, I don't believe that the president should have taken control of General Motors in the way that they did. Yet they had to do something to guarantee that the American taxpayers' investments were responsibly returned, and that was not happening in the manner that the initial stimulus had laid out for it to happen. So I think it's just unfortunate that we're pointing the finger at the president and blaming him for all of the ills in the economy. President Obama came in talking about health care and has in stalwart way worked toward that, and I think that is a wonderful idea. I know that the Congress on both sides of the aisle are working toward an amicable health care bill, and I think that given the increase in health care costs over the past 5 years and what's been projected over the next 20, we have to, in some way or another, control those costs. And leaving what could eventually reach 90 million to 100 million people within the next 2 years without health insurance is simply not acceptable. And there are conservatives out there that are saying, well, tough, if you can't come up with insurance, then you just die. But yet the conservatives start spouting misinformation about death panels, and that in itself is an outright lie. I think that if you look back at the efforts by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce trying to wipe out health care, and you look the opposite direction in that same bill and find that the doctors and the nurses are behind it, I think we have to go in the direction that the professionals in healthcare think we need to go, toward responsible health care at a minimal cost. And immediately, you conservatives tend to want to point the finger at the president and call him a socialist. If he were a socialist, he wouldn't be working hand in hand with the conservatives to accomplish this. He would simply be pushing it through Congress, which he is not doing. Pointing the finger at the president is not a responsible way to do it. It took 8 years with George Bush spending worse than any Democrat ever did for the economy to reach the direction it has. And regardless of what other conservatives say, when President Clinton left office, we had a surplus. Now, at the end of 8 years, under conservative policies and the Republican Party controlling the government, we're in a condition, or we're in at a point where we're close to an all-out